Rosy Window Productions was founded to create resources that help parents, teachers, and caregivers in supporting youth and children with positive mental health habits. Last season, we explored the idea that it doesn't only take a village to raise a child, but to support the whole family. Welcome back to Season 3 of Through a Rosy Window into Wellness. In the last episode, we were very fortunate to speak to some people from Northern Health who filled us in on what kind of services and supports they give our community here in Fort St. John. In this episode, we're going to speak to two of the collaborators that Northern Health spoke about. In the second part of our program, we will touch base with the founders of Saplings Mental Health Services. But to start us off today, we'll have excerpts from the interview we did with Carleen Andrews, who is the Director of Instruction for Peace River North School District 60.
So, just a little bit of a context of our area, Fort St. John and surrounding area. I did do a little, I thought, gosh, our district is quite vast in that it, made a couple notes here that we serve communities north of the Peace River and south of mile 226 on the Alaska Highway. So quite a broad spectrum of schools that we serve. We have 13 urban schools, as urban as it gets in Fort St. John in the northeast here, and we have 10 rural schools, one of them being about 2 hours away when we think about upper halfway. And we also have a K-12 online learning, which is students but also adults. Yeah, so it's a district of about 6,000 students, give or take, a couple hundred, and 1,100 staff. We are situated on the traditional territory of the Deneza, Sachena Dene within Treaty 8. And so definitely are very cognizant in these recent years, in particular around local education agreements and meeting our First Nations. They're partners, but they're also right holders. So that's really influenced a lot of some transformational change we're making in our district around Indigenous education. And, again, with just the influx of students coming from different countries, we have quite a varied linguistic group, which maybe historically wasn't the case in this area. But yeah, lots of new Canadians coming to Canada and to Fort St. John. So yeah, it's quite a vast demographic, I would say, represented in our area and in our district. I spent many years working as a school counselor in middle school and elementary schools. And if you want me to even go further, my undergraduate degree is in education, absolutely. But I had a bit of a pivotal moment after my third year of university. I came back to Fort St. John and worked at a wilderness camp for court-ordered youth. So they either came to our camp or they went into custody. And I spent a summer working there and actually ended up taking a gap year and spending the year working at that wilderness camp, because for me it blended that idea of on the land and outward bound with counseling. And then I took a bit of a pivot. I finished my undergraduate, but then went in and got a master's degree in psychology counseling, and then worked as a mental health clinician for 11 years before moving into the school system. Once my kids started school, I thought, maybe I'll be on the same hours as they are. And so I moved into education. So I've been with the district for about 25 years. I made my way back to education because it's also an amazing sort of context to be working with kids and other humans, for sure. I'm a counselor at heart, and it's in my blood and bones. And so my lens has always been through a mental health, mental wellness lens. And I've always been in the positions, of counselor, a teacher as well. I always had a teaching assignment, but definitely I grounded my foundation has always been about the well-being of humans, whether they be our students or staff. Um, but I feel historically, um, well, let's talk about in 2020, our government, the province, created something called the Mental Health in Schools strategy, which I was excited about and continue to be very excited about because it's really being very purposeful and mindful about social emotional learning and mental health wellness within our school system. So it's really looking at our learners not just as academic learners, but just as humans who are developing and wanting to develop their social emotional learning and their mental health wellness. So I think historically our system, when I started in it as a counselor, we sort of were more reactive, or we were providing services when something came up in the, kind of a crisis, an intervention. And we're really trying to move away from that reactive approach, but front end loading and being preventative and building resilience in our students around their social emotional learning and mental health wellness. So that's really exciting for me as a counselor, because I really feel if you can provide a foundation and give students resilience as they move forward in their life, we're really going to set them up for success, and we won't be reacting to mental health crisis further along. I really felt that there was another way that we could be making an impact in a more proactive, mitigating way. And so when I was an elementary counselor, I really thought I need to get in and support teachers because they're dealing, when I'm here, I take this student for an hour. We have a lovely time in a calm environment with an adult who's, attentive. And then we send them back into the classroom environment. And are we really building a skill? And the teacher, is kind of left dealing with it. So I really felt back then there was a need to build the capacity of our classroom teachers around mental health wellness, and what things could they embed in their environment that would help regulate students and just build that sense of belonging and connection, which is so important for mental health. Um, so fast forward to when I came into here in this position and sort of the direction that the Ministry of Education and Childcare was going around the mental health strategy. And I thought, oh my goodness, now we can create a structure that's more, purposeful and mindful. So that was really exciting. So I took over the team here at the district, and we created a bit of a different approach. So we counselor consultants is what we're calling our elementary folks that work at the district. It's a big job, and so just we thought, how can we sort of make this service more robust? So we have hired SEL specialists who aren't teachers. They usually come to us through a social work background or a psychology background or a youth care worker background. So we've created teams and families of schools. So a counselor consultant and an SEL specialist, they have their family of schools, which is about 3 schools, and they kind of go into the schools as a unified team, looking at building that capacity within the school on a more universal level initially, right? What can we teach all kids about mental health wellness, social emotional learning that we know would probably mitigate a lot of maybe issues that could occur if they didn't have this skill set or the resilience being built. So that's really exciting. It's a bit of a different approach for our system. And, a bit of a journey getting traction because, school systems, we're used to doing things a certain way, but I feel that we're really starting to move this new framework forward, and coming from a place of strength-based. Students, no matter what they're navigating, have something to bring to a classroom. So, historically, we were a bit of a take out and, intervene, do an intervention, and bring them back into the environment. Now we're really starting to look at our environments and how do we create spaces for kids of all diverse needs, whatever that might be. Create environments where they have a sense of belonging, they feel they have a voice and an authentic connection. So we're really looking at building those classroom and school environments, which is, we're on the road. I'm not saying we're perfect, but it's really definitely our focus and our aim. We do have students that are navigating complex issues and families, right, that need support. So that is definitely something that we're seeing, that it just the other resources, they're having a hard time getting and keeping staff. right? And so that impacts um, who's getting service. There's a bit of an equity question there, because if you can afford private counseling, then you're a bit of ahead of the game. But there's folks that can't, right? And so, and we know those agencies have wait lists, right? Which leads me to the wonderful work that the stabilization team and Saplings is doing. Because my goodness, since they're so collaborative, and that really is another kind of foundational philosophy I have. We can't work in our islands or silos, right? We really need to wrap around, and I've always felt that, but even more so now that resources are limited. And they've been just so fabulous at sitting at our tables when we're, because they're dealing with kids that come um, through their doors, and they're so happy to sit at tables and work collaboratively. And what can the school provide, and how can we bridge what they're working on with kids, and just wrapping around that student and those families. And so that's been just an incredible impact, I feel, on the work that we're doing since they've got up and running. Can't say enough wonderful about that organization.
It's not often that we meet people with the passion and drive and insight that Laura Honey and Julia Hintermeister, the founders of Saplings Mental Health Services, have. It was such a pleasure to sit down and talk with these two ladies about their journey and about all the good work that they're doing in Fort St. John. We're so lucky to have them.
Both Julia and I were in private practice in the community for a few years prior to Saplings being established. The reason Saplings came to fruition was really in response to a demand, a gap, a need for children and adolescent mental health services in our community. We had noticed, just for ourselves, that we had lengthy wait lists, children waiting long periods of time to get in for mental health services. We had also started to become aware of news articles coming through the local papers regarding children and adolescent mental health or substance use crisis, especially presenting at our emergency department here in town, that were perhaps maybe having suicidal ideations, were having some fairly serious mental health conditions, and the community not having resources to be able to support them through that emergency department, and then post coming out of the emergency department. And so Julia and myself began kind of spearheading some initiatives in the community, and along with some colleagues that we knew, really started to advocate for what we felt was some need for services to fill these gaps. And we approached a few different people and organizations, and we thought about a few different routes that we might be able to start to obtain some funding, and looking at different program initiatives. We were able to find our one, who was Donna Ward. Let's give a little recognition to Donna Ward, who was the Director of Specialized Services for Northern Health at the time. And she had told us she had 3 initiatives that she wanted to do in the community while she was here, and she wanted to support children and adolescent mental health services, that she wanted to look at adult services for addictions and substance use, and for senior services. And so we fit right within that mandate that she wanted. And so she gave us an opportunity to start some services through the emergency department, responding to children and adolescents in crisis. And they cleared out a wheelchair room next to the emergency department, and we put some desks in there, and Julia and I went to work in responding to some of the kiddos that were coming through the hospital.
So we have 3 kind of streams for referral. The first would be our inpatient outpatient work in the ER. The referral stream for that is through the ER exclusively, an emergency department doctor, nurse, or psych liaison nurse. From there, that referral comes to us. We support inpatient, but the bulk of the work is outpatient. Historically, children would leave to see doctors in Prince George or psychiatry in BC Children's Hospital in Vancouver. Very stressful to be away from family, stressful to be away from community.
And
the
costly.
work would be done, costly. And then they would return home, and there wouldn't be supports in place for the follow-up. So a big piece of the work with the inpatient outpatient program is that supporting after you're discharged from hospital. What does that look like? How can we help parents feel confident in parenting a child who's experiencing suicidal thoughts? How can we help the school as the child returns to school after something like an attempt? How do we help children access life skills programming, which we also offer, or pro-social activities, that kind of thing. So that program is strictly through emergency department referrals. Our next stream is that community piece where we can have referrals come from teachers, social workers, parents, and the youth themselves. They can self-refer. And that would be around our mental health concurrent with substance use. That teen to young adult transition age, we have clinicians who focus really in that age range to help young adults who are experiencing struggles with both mental health and substance use disorders. We also have an early psychosis intervention program. Those programs exist across the province and across Canada, and we're very fortunate to hold the contract for this region. That program is also, it can be self-referral, doctors, community referral. Families can reach out if they're concerned about one of their children or brothers or sisters. The community piece is really, really important, and I think that's a bulk of the work that we do. Yes. But we still find that there is children in need who don't meet that criteria of that teens, mental health, substance use kind of concurrent disorders. And so we've started a third stream for referrals. Yes. And this is mostly at this point, our younger teens and children who haven't experimented with substance use and so don't fit those other categories through the Northern Health funding, but require that mental health support, require counseling around perhaps anxiety, behaviors that are being seen at school, low mood, all kinds of things. So we've started a program stream whereby people can self-refer, or a parent can call for their child, and it is paid privately by the individual parent, but there's lots of funding that is available in community that we can help them navigate and negotiate. So perhaps they have access to funding for Métis Ancestry, First Nations Health Authority, autism funding. All of those can be used to access this program.
Extended
insurance,
benefits.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And from there, we're able to offer something that can meet that need quickly. There's no wait list for that program.
We don't hold any wait lists.
Actually, we have no wait list on any of our programs. Okay. We said from the very beginning, even when it was just 2 of us, we never had a wait list because we said wait lists kill kids.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds really harsh, but in our line of work, children can't wait. Yeah, children can't wait.
Yeah.
So we work really hard to balance the team's well-being and not having wait lists, but in that program we don't have any wait lists, and it's important to us that when children need services, they access services right away.
So my initial thoughts around the challenges or deficiencies in our small northern community, right? Mm-hmm. It's that it can be difficult to obtain and retain professionals. Mm-hmm. We find that there is a greater need than availability for services, and I think that leads to some burnout in our line of work. Sometimes families move up here for job opportunities, and then maybe something doesn't work out, and then away the family goes, right? Taking any maybe professional, associations that they have within that family. I think, living in a rural community does present also the barrier to looking at, funding options and availability of organizations, right? We only have a few organizations up here that can offer those kind of services.
Yeah. And what I would say around professionals is Laura and I have had the absolute pleasure of working with some of the most thoughtful, well-intentioned, incredible professionals that we've met in our career up here in the last few years. And that the problem is people who are, we call transplants, we're our transplants ourselves. You might always have ties elsewhere. Yeah. And the pull to go back to where your family's from might outweigh the thing that brought you here. And so it's not that people don't want to live here and don't want to do the work here, but there's always a balance when we have a very transient community. Yeah. Something that Laura and I really focus on is the next generation of professionals.
Yes.
We work very hard to make sure we always have students going in our programs, so that we are working with people who want to be here, who want to stay here, and we're helping to resource them up.
What is unique to our population is that we live in a rural northern community where access to larger assessment centers, access to a variety of different programs that kids can fit into is non-existent. And that creates huge barriers for children and their families trying to get the help and support that kids need.
And I would say across Canada, North America, and the world, we have seen documented an increase in depression in teens and children. We've seen an increase in suicide attempts. We've seen an increase in our community. We've seen a staggering increase in self-harm in the last 2 years. So in from that view, that's not unique to our region, but like Laura said, what's unique is our children in these small rural areas are experiencing the same stressors, the same pressure, the same onslaught of media and social media, etc., that their peers in larger urban centers are experiencing, but here they are left with less opportunities to access resources. One of the things that Laura and I often talk about is that children are not operating in isolation. When a child comes into our office and we work with a child and we speak to them about emotions and emotional regulation and mindfulness and distress tolerance, they still go home to that family, perhaps a chosen family, family of origin, perhaps they're in care. They still go home to a home environment. And what we have seen in recent years that, again, is not unique to our town, but is perhaps exacerbated in our town, is stress in the home. Life has gotten harder, more expensive, groceries, cost of living, keeping employment. It's very, very stressful for the grown-ups in the children's lives that we work with. And when grown-ups are stressed and overwhelmed and overrun, it can't help but trickle down to the teens and the young adults and the kids. And we often say that if our children have a safe harbor to go home to, it makes the stress at school or the stress of their work or their stress of their day-to-day lives with peers, if they have a safe place to land at the end of the day, it can really mediate some of that. But we are seeing an increase, and in our town particularly, we've had a huge closure of our adult mental health services, and we are seeing the trickle-down effect of that in this last year, unfortunately.
On behalf of all of us here at Rosy Window Productions, we'd like to thank you for stopping by today, and we hope that you've enjoyed the excerpts from the interviews that we've done with these wonderful people in our community. We have to remember to be grateful for the things that we have and to recognize when we can step up and fill those gaps and those needs that are in every community. So please be kind to each other and take care.